Chapter 11. General Hygiene. God designed that man should be active and useful, yet the life of many is little more than mere existence. They never brighten the path of others, never bless those around them. On the contrary, they are only a burden. On the side of right, their influence is little more than a cipher. Scarcely an instance of disinterested benevolence brightens their life record. No pleasant memory survives them at their death, for there was no true goodness to leave a loving impress, even on the hearts of their friends. Such a life is a sad failure. It is the life of an unfaithful steward who forgets that his Creator has claims upon him. Selfish interests attract his mind and lead to forgetfulness of God and of His purpose in the creation of man. God placed Adam and Eve in paradise and surrounded them with everything that was useful and lovely. He planted for them a beautiful garden in which no herb or flower or tree was lacking that might be for use or ornament. Paradise delighted their senses, but this was not enough. They must have something to call into play the wonderful machinery of the human system. Had happiness consisted in doing nothing, man in his state of holy innocence would have been left unemployed. But He who formed man knew what would be for his best happiness, and He no sooner created him than He gave him his appointed work. A life of useful labor is indispensable to the physical, mental, and moral well-being of man. God has given us all something to do, and in the discharge of various duties, our lives will be made useful, and we shall be blessed. Not slothful in business is the injunction of the Apostle Paul. A person might as well expect a harvest where he has not sown, as to expect to be saved while living in indolence. The race is not always to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Yet he shall become poor that dealeth with a slack hand. Those who are diligent in business may not always be prospered, but drowsiness and idleness are sure to grieve the Spirit of God and destroy true godliness. A stagnant pool becomes offensive, but a pure flowing brook spreads health and gladness over the land. Riches and idleness are thought by some to be blessings indeed, but those who are always busy and who cheerfully go about their daily tasks are the most happy and enjoy the best health. The healthful weariness which results from well-regulated labor secures to them the benefits of refreshing sleep. The sentence that man must toil for his daily bread and the promise of future happiness and glory both came from the same throne, and both are blessings. Those who are in possession of wealth and leisure, and yet have no purpose in life, have little to arouse them to either mental or physical activity. Thus many a woman loses her health and is driven to seek some medical institution for treatment. Here attendants are hired at great expense to rub, stretch, and exercise the muscles which have become powerless by inaction. She hires servants that she may live a life of idleness, and then hires other servants to exercise the muscles enfeebled by disuse. What consummate folly! How much wiser and better for women, young or old, to brave the sneers of fashion's votaries, and obey the dictates of common sense and the laws of life. By the cheerful performance of domestic duties, the idle daughters of our land might become useful and happy members of society. For many, such labor is a more effective and profitable movement cure than the best inventions of the physicians. Young men, as well as young women, often manifest a sad lack of earnest purpose and moral independence. To dress, to smoke, to talk nonsense, and to indulge their passion for amusement is the ideal of happiness even with many who profess to be Christians. It is painful to think of the time thus misspent. Hours that should be given to the study of the Scriptures or to active labor for Christ are worse than wasted. Life was given for a true and holy purpose. It is too precious to be thus squandered. I entreat you who have taken the name of Christ, examine your hearts and pass sentence upon yourselves. Do not love pleasure more than you love God or your fellow men. There is work to be done. There are souls to save. There are battles to fight. There is a heaven to win. The mind with all its capabilities must be strengthened and stored with the treasures of divine wisdom. In the strength of God, you may do noble work for the Master. God designed that all should be workers. Upon those whose abilities and opportunities are the greatest rest the heaviest responsibilities, and upon them will fall the heaviest condemnation if they are unfaithful to their trust. Even beasts of burden put to shame the do-nothing, who, endowed with human reason and a knowledge of the divine will, refuses to perform his part in God's great plan. The indolence of the many occasions the overwork of the few. A large class refuse to think or act for themselves. They have no disposition to step out of the old ruts of prejudice and error. By their perversity they block up the way of advancement, and force the standard-bearers of the right to make more heroic efforts in their march forward. Earnest and devoted laborers are failing for want of a helping hand, and are sinking beneath the double burden. Their graves are waymarks along the upward path of reform. The true glory and joy of life are found only by the working man and woman. Labor brings its own reward, and sweet is the rest that is purchased by the fatigue of a well-spent day. But there is a self-imposed toil which is injurious and utterly unsatisfying. It is that which gratifies unsanctified ambition, which seeks display for notoriety. The love of possession or appearance leads thousands to carry to excess that which in itself is lawful, to devote all the strength of mind and body to that which should occupy but a small portion of their time. They bend every energy to the acquisition of wealth or honor, making all other objects secondary. They toil unflinchingly for years to accomplish their purpose, yet when the goal is reached and the coveted reward secured, it turns to ashes in their grasp. It is a shadow. They have given their life to that which profiteth not. Yet all the lawful pursuits of life may be safely followed, if the spirit is kept free from selfish hopes and the contamination of deceit and envy. The business life of the Christian should be marked with the same purity that held sway in the workshop of the holy Nazarene. It is the working men and women, those who are willing to bear responsibilities with faith and hope, who find that which is great and good in life. Patient laborers, remember that those were sturdy workmen whom Christ chose from among the fishermen of Galilee and the tent-makers of Corinth to labor with him in the work of salvation. From these humble men went forth a power that will be felt throughout all eternity. The angels are workers. They are ministers of God to the children of men. Those slothful servants who look forward to a heaven of inaction have false ideas of what constitutes heaven. The Creator has prepared no place for the gratification of sinful indolence. Heaven is a place of interested activity. Yet to the weary and heavy laden, to those who have fought the good fight of faith, it will be a glorious rest. For the youth and vigor of immortality will be theirs, and against sin and Satan they will no longer have to contend. To these energetic workers a state of eternal indolence would be irksome. It would be no heaven to them. The path of toil appointed to the Christian on earth may be hard and wearisome, but it is honored by the footprints of the Redeemer, and he is safe who follows in that sacred way. The idea that those who have overtaxed their mental and physical powers, or who have broken down in body or mind, must suspend activity in order to regain health is a great error. In a few cases, entire rest for a time may be necessary, but such instances are rare. In most cases, the change would be too great to be beneficial. Those who have broken down by intense mental labor should have rest from wearing thought, yet to teach them that it is wrong or even dangerous for them to exercise their mental powers at all leads them to view their condition as worse than it really is. They are nervous and finally become a burden to themselves, as well as to those who care for them. In this state of mind, their recovery is doubtful indeed. Those who have overtaxed their mental powers should not be advised to forego labor entirely. To shut them away from all exercise would in many cases prevent their restoration to health. The will goes with the labor of the hands, and when the willpower is dormant, the imagination becomes abnormal, so that it is impossible for the sufferer to resist disease. Inactivity is the greatest curse that could come upon one in such a condition. Nature's fine and wonderful mechanism needs to be constantly exercised in order to be in a condition to accomplish the object for which it was designed. The do-nothing system is a dangerous one in any case. Physical exercise in the direction of useful labor has a happy influence upon the mind, strengthens the muscles, improves the circulation, and gives the invalid the satisfaction of knowing how much he can endure, and that he is not wholly useless in this busy world. Whereas, if this is restricted, his attention is turned to himself, and he is in constant danger of exaggerating his difficulties. If invalids would engage in some well-directed physical exercise, using their strength but not abusing it, they would find it an effective agent in their recovery. When the weather will permit, those who are engaged in sedentary occupations should, if possible, walk out in the open air every day, summer and winter. The clothing should be suitable, and the feet well protected. Walking is often more beneficial to health than all the medicine that can be prescribed. For those who can endure it, walking is preferable to riding, for it brings all the muscles into exercise. The lungs also are forced into healthy action, since it is impossible to walk in the bracing air of a winter morning without inflating them. Exercise aids the dyspeptic by giving the digestive organs a healthy tone. To engage in deep study or violent exercise immediately after eating hinders the digestive process. For the vitality of the system, which is needed to carry on the work of digestion, is called away to other parts. But a short walk after a meal, with the head erect and the shoulders back, exercising moderately, is a great benefit. The mind is diverted from self to the beauties of nature. The less the attention is called to the stomach, the better. If you are in constant fear that your food will hurt you, it most assuredly will. Forget your troubles. Think of something cheerful. More people die for want of exercise than from overwork. Very many more rust out than wear out. In idleness, the blood does not circulate freely, and the changes in the vital fluid so necessary to health and life do not take place. The little mouths in the skin through which the body breathes become clogged, thus making it impossible to eliminate impurities through that channel. This throws a double burden upon the other excretory organs, and disease is soon produced. Those who accustom themselves to exercising in the open air generally have a vigorous circulation. Men and women, young or old, who desire health and who would enjoy life should remember that they cannot have these without a good circulation. Whatever their business or inclinations, they should feel it a religious duty to make wise efforts to overcome the conditions of disease which have kept them indoors. Mental influence. The Lord has shown me that many who are always complaining and are apparently feeble are not in so bad a condition as they think. Some of them have a powerful will, which if exercised in the right direction, would control the imagination and be a potent means of resisting disease. But it is too frequently the case that the will is on the wrong side, and stubbornly refuses to yield to reason. That will has settled the matter. Invalids they are, and the attention given to invalids they will have, irrespective of the judgment of others. Thousands are sick and dying around us who might get well and live if they would, but their imagination controls them. They fear they will be made worse if they engage in any physical labor, when this is just the change they need. They should exercise their willpower and rise above their difficulties, engage in useful employment suited to their strength, and forget that they have aching backs, sides, lungs, and heads. Let invalids have an exalted aim in life, seeking to be useful and efficient in their own families, and to become useful members of society. Let them not require the attention of the whole family to be centered on themselves, nor draw largely upon the sympathies of others. Let them do their part in bestowing love and sympathy upon the unfortunate, remembering that each has woes and trials peculiar to himself. In thus blessing others, they will realize an abundant blessing themselves. Those who, so far as it is possible, engage in the work of doing good to others, by giving practical demonstration of their interest in them, are not only relieving the ills of life and helping them to bear burdens, but are at the same time contributing largely to their own health of soul and body. Doing good is a work that benefits both giver and receiver. If you forget self and your interest for others, you gain a victory over your own infirmities. The pleasure of doing good animates the mind and vibrates through the whole body. If you clothe the naked and bring the poor that are cast out to thy house, and deal thy bread to the hungry, then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily. Importance of pure air. Some invalids refuse to be convinced of the great importance of having a constant supply of pure air. For fear of taking cold, they willfully persist in living from year to year in an atmosphere almost destitute of vitality. It is impossible for such to have a healthy circulation. The skin is debilitated and they become sensitive to any change in the atmosphere. The first suggestion of cold brings out additional clothing, and the heat of the room is increased. The next day they require a little more heat and a little more clothing, in order to feel perfectly warm, and thus they humor every changing feeling until they have but little vitality left. If those who can would engage in some active employment, instead of adding to their clothing or raising the temperature of an already overheated room, they would generally forget their chilly sensations and would receive no harm. For feeble lungs, an overheated atmosphere is very injurious. Winter is a season to be dreaded by those who are obliged to be with these invalids. It is not only winter out of doors, but dreary indoors. Under the plea that the air affects their lungs and head, these victims of a diseased imagination shut themselves up in the house and close the windows. They expect to take cold from the least exposure, and they do. Have we not proved it? They will argue, and no amount of reasoning can make them believe that they do not understand the philosophy of the whole matter. It is true that they do take cold when exposed, but it is because their course has made them as tender as babies, and they cannot endure anything. Yet they live on with windows and doors closed, hovering over the stove, and enjoying their misery. Why will not such try the effect of judicious outdoor exercise? Many have been taught that night air is positively injurious to health, and therefore must be excluded from their rooms. One autumn evening I was traveling in a crowded car. The exhalations from so many lungs and bodies rendered the atmosphere very impure, and caused a sickening sensation to come over me. I raised my window, and was enjoying the fresh air, when a lady in earnest, imploring tones cried out, "Do put down that window. You will take cold and be sick. The night air is so unhealthful." I replied, "Madam, we have no other air than night air, in this car or out of it. If you refuse to breathe the night air, you must stop breathing." In the cool of the evening, it may be necessary to guard against chilliness by extra clothing, but there should be a free circulation of pure air through the room during sleeping hours. The free air of heaven by day or night is one of the richest blessings we can enjoy. Fresh air will purify the blood, refresh the body, and help to make it strong and healthy. The invigoration produced will be reflected upon the mind, imparting to it a tone and clearness, as well as a degree of composure and serenity. It gives a healthful stimulus to the appetite, renders the digestion of food more perfect, and induces sound, sweet sleep. Living in close, ill-ventilated rooms weakens the system, makes the mind gloomy, the skin sallow, and the circulation feeble. The blood moves sluggishly, digestion is retarded, and the system is rendered peculiarly sensitive to cold. One should so accustom himself to fresh, cool air that he will not be affected by slight changes of temperature. Of course, he should be careful not to sit in a draught or in a cold room when weary, or when in a perspiration. Many labor under the mistaken idea that if they have taken cold, they must carefully exclude the outside air and increase the temperature of the room until it is excessively hot. But the system of one suffering with cold is deranged. The pores are closed by waste matter, and there is more or less inflammation of the internal organs, because the blood has been chilled back from the surface and thrown upon them. At this time of all others, the lungs should not be deprived of pure air. Judicious exercise would induce the blood to the surface, and thus relieve the internal organs. The power of the will is a great help in resisting cold and giving energy to the nervous system. To deprive the lungs of air is like depriving the stomach of food. Air is the food that God has provided for the lungs. Welcome it, cultivate a love for it, as a precious boon of heaven. Home hygiene. One of the most prolific sources of disease is the transgression of the laws of life in regard to personal habits. Order and cleanliness are laws of heaven. The directions given to Moses when the Lord was about to declare his law upon Mount Sinai were very strict in this respect. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. They were directed to do this, lest there should be impurity about them as they should come before him. He is a God of order, and he requires order and cleanliness in his people. The children of Israel were in no case to allow any impurities to remain upon their clothing or upon themselves. Those who had any personal uncleanness were to be shut out of the camp until the evening, and then were required to cleanse themselves and their clothing before they could return. They were also commanded to carry all their refuse to a great distance from the camp, and this was a sanitary measure as well as a religious regulation. The Lord requires no less of his people now than he did anciently. A neglect of cleanliness will induce disease. Sickness does not come without a cause. Violent epidemics of fevers have occurred in villages and cities that were considered perfectly healthful, and these have resulted in death or broken constitutions. In many instances, the premises of the very ones who fell victims to these epidemics contained the agents of destruction, which sent forth deadly poison into the atmosphere, to be inhaled by the family and the neighborhood. It is astonishing to witness the prevailing ignorance relative to the effects which slackness and recklessness produce upon health. When Lord Palmerston, Premier of England, was petitioned by the Scottish clergy to appoint a day of fasting and prayer to avert the cholera, he replied, Cleanse and disinfect your streets and houses, promote cleanliness and health among the poor, and see that they are plentifully supplied with good food and raiment, and employ right sanitary measures generally, and you will have no occasion to fast and pray. Nor will the Lord hear your prayers while these, his preventives, remain unheeded. It is not God who has brought upon us the many woes which mortals now inherit. Our own folly has led us to deprive ourselves of things that are precious, of the blessings which, if properly used, are of inestimable value in the maintenance of health. If you would have your home sweet and inviting, make it bright with air and sunshine. Remove your heavy curtains, open the windows, throw back the blinds, and enjoy the rich sunlight, even if it be at the expense of the colors of your carpets. Some houses are furnished expensively, more to gratify pride than for the comfort, convenience, or health of the family. The best rooms are kept closed and dark, lest the light might injure the rich furniture, fade the carpets, or tarnish the picture frames. When visitors are permitted to be seated in these precious rooms, they are in danger of taking cold because of the damp atmosphere pervading them. Parlor bedrooms are kept closed for the same reasons. Sleeping rooms should be large, and so arranged as to have a free circulation of air day and night. Those who have slept in an ill-ventilated room awake feeling feverish and exhausted. This is because the vital air was excluded, and the whole system suffers in consequence. Whoever occupies beds which have not been freely exposed to the air and sunlight does so at the risk of health, and often even of life itself. There should be a circulation of air and an abundance of light through every apartment of the house for several hours each day. If you have God's presence and possess earnest, loving hearts, then a humble home made bright with air and sunshine, and cheerful with the welcome of unselfish hospitality, will be to your family and the weary traveler a heaven below. Upon rising in the morning, most persons would be benefited by taking a sponge or hand bath. This will remove all impurities from the skin and keep it moist and supple, thereby aiding the circulation. Persons in health should on no account neglect frequent bathing. Whether a person is sick or well, respiration is rendered more free and full by bathing. The mind and body are alike invigorated. The muscles become more flexible. Every faculty of the intellect is made brighter. The bath is a soother of the nerves. Instead of increasing the liability of taking cold, it fortifies against cold, because it improves the circulation. The blood is brought to the surface, and a more easy and regular flow of the vital fluid is obtained. A yard beautified with scattering trees and some shrubbery at a proper distance from the house has a happy influence upon the family, and if well taken care of, will prove no injury to the health. But shade trees and shrubbery close and dense around a house make it unhealthful, for they prevent the free circulation of air and shut out the rays of the sun. In consequence, a dampness gathers in the house, especially in wet seasons. Those who occupy the sleeping rooms are troubled with rheumatism, neuralgia, and lung complaints. Then the great quantities of fallen leaves, if not removed immediately, decay and poison the atmosphere. Dwellings, if possible, should be built on high ground. If a house is built where the water will settle around it, remaining for a time and slowly drying away, there is a poisonous miasma continually rising from the damp ground, which breeds sore throat, fevers, ague, or lung diseases. Many expect that God will keep them from sickness merely because they ask Him to do so. But the prayers of those who do not regard the laws of life God cannot answer, because their faith is not made perfect by works. When we do all on our part to ensure health, then we may expect that good results will follow, and we can ask God in faith to bless our efforts, and He will answer our prayer if His name can be glorified thereby. But let all understand that they have a work to do. God will not work in a miraculous manner to preserve the health of persons who are by their careless inattention to the laws of health taking a sure course to make themselves sick. The Lord has shown me that Sabbath keepers as a rule labor too hard, without allowing themselves change or periods of rest. Recreation is needful to those who engage in physical labor, and is still more essential for those whose work is principally mental. It is not essential to our salvation, nor for the glory of God, to keep the mind laboring constantly and excessively, even upon religious themes. There are amusements such as card-playing, dancing, theater-going, etc., which we cannot approve because heaven condemns them. They open the door to great evils. By their exciting tendency, they produce in some minds a passion for gambling and dissipation. All such amusements should be condemned by Christians, and something perfectly harmless should be substituted in their place. There are modes of recreation which are highly beneficial to both mind and body. An enlightened, discriminating mind will find abundant means for entertainment and diversion from sources not only innocent but instructive. Recreation in the open air and the contemplation of the works of God in nature will be of the highest benefit.